Okay, here we are, part 2. Like I said, we're about to up the ante. You guys just learned SPs, and I'm already going to throw you in the deep end with some really good stuff here. Because, what the hell, right? Okay, let's review first. So, how about defining SPs? How do you define an SP? Yes, schema, name, and procedure, absolutely. Input parameters, do they go before or after the as? Before. Why are you looking at me like that? Oh, okay. As. The as. You looked at me like I quacked. You know, we've got that thing. We've got that thing at home, right? Where we call it, it's like I quacked at a puppy. Because if you ever had a little puppy and you go, blah, and they're like, that's what I get. Okay, let's see. What about, name 3 things that are a good case for an SP. Why would you want to create an SP? I'll tell you what, let's do this. You name one. Run a query multiple times, right. How does that help? Yes. Anything? What's another reason why you'd create an SP? Sure. I wasn't pointing at you, but no, it's all good. You're number 2. You're number 3.
Well, I mean, you return. Well, let's see.
Anybody else? Security, yes. Trace, yes. Complexity, yes. What's the big one? Contractual, yes. All of those were correct. Yeah, okay, I only promised you I wouldn't say you were all correct in the last one. Okay, that's the only one you get on this one. All right. Do what? Well, he said performance because you've already got a plan. Does that mean you can't cache ad hoc SQL?
No, I didn't say that, but by default, procedure does it.
On the first execution. Yeah. Well, so does an ad hoc. You can cache ad hoc plans.
Then you have to set it not out of the box.
You don't have to set it. You have to run it once and it gets cached. Just like an SP.
True, but in a fast-moving environment that gets wiped out, there is not enough memory.
So does an SP plan.
Does the SP plans get wiped out?
Well, yeah. If there's not if you've got tons of objects in your plan, and you don't have enough memory, and that object hasn't been called, well, it's going to be pushed out in lieu of something that's being called now. Absolutely.
Plan gets wiped out or
Sure.
because you have a separate cache for stored procedures. Right?
And if it gets too big, what happens? SQL doesn't just stop, right? Okay. All right, but we are getting well off course. Did I actually start this? Yes, I did. Good. Whew. I was scared there for a second, guys. All right, so we are going to jump straight into output parameters. Now, this took me a long time to understand because nobody teaches it worth a damn. So I'm going to do my best to teach it worth a damn. All right? So, so far, the SPs that we've written have returned result sets, right? But we are going to return an output parameter that can be assigned to another parameter. I know. She's looking at me like, I know. All right. Let me show you. So I'm going to use the proper database for a change. And I've got this SP output parameters. With any luck, looks like I got something at the bottom there too. Oh, yeah, I got a whole bunch of stuff in here. Okay, so I'm going to do this. IntelliSense, there we go. So what I do here is in my input parameters, I assign them the same way I always did, with the name and the data type, only I give it the output keyword right after it. And what's going to happen here is I'm going to assign a variable. Which one am I doing here? MyDB. So I'm going to assign this variable based on something, right? Assign the variable to DB1 or assign it to DB2, depending on the ID. Does everybody understand this syntax? It's really simple t-SQL syntax, right? And you notice how there's no return? There's no query at the end that returns data? So whatever the value of this parameter ends up being, or this variable, whatever this variable ends up being when the SP ends, is going to be returned to the caller. So I don't have to explicitly say select star from this or select @MyDB as my DB name, right? I just say set the @MyDB variable, and it is automatically returned to the caller without me having to do anything special. Do you get that? Even understanding the concept of why you would use an output parameter can be fuzzy, right? So the question becomes, why do you use output parameters to begin with? Hopefully I'm going to be able to suss that out as we go on, okay? For now, let's memorize the syntax, and I'm going to start hitting different points, and as I hit those different points, I hope to be able to make it more clear. Okay, but they can be, sure.
Unless I'm taking the file. This syntax can be replaced by case statement. Performance-wise, which works better?
I don't care. This is just an example. I wanted to make these as simple as possible, right? But in something this simple, it won't matter. It really won't. The bigger it gets, or if you have to look up data and stuff, then it starts to matter. But simple little ifs like this, no, it's not going to matter. Okay, so here's a design question for you before we get on the thing. How come I said if and if instead of if and then? Because I've only got two values here, right? How come I didn't say if then? I mean, it would be easy enough to say if it's 1, do this, or else. I'm sorry, not then, but else. Or else do this. How come I didn't do that? Yeah, exactly. So I can copy and paste it. If I have more IDs, it's easier for me to just copy this whole thing, paste it down there, change it to a 3, and then change the value and move on, right? Okay, so, yes?
Having a little bit of a problem because up on the execute procedure line, you've got,
We haven't talked about that yet. We're getting there. Don't worry about it. We'll get there, all right? Hey, I'm talking here. All right. So, did I ever alter this thing properly? I don't think so. So I'm going to do this. There we go. And now I have to call it. Now, calling an SP with an output parameter is a little bit more involved and a little bit screwy in syntax. And I hope to explain the syntax to you in depth because it took me a long time to understand it as well. But in short, I'm just going to show it to you now, and then we're going to take a look at it. So I start by declaring my variable. Everybody understands that. There's my SP call. How come I used exec here? Nope. Because it's in the middle of these guys here, and I have to use an exec, right? Because I'm not calling it by itself. Okay, so here's the first parameter I'm passing in. Here's the output parameter. This is the screwy syntax, right? With an output, and then I'm going to select this parameter. I promise this will be made very clear. When I run this, I get db1 back because I passed in 1, right? That's what the SP said. When ID is 1, pass back db1, right? So that's what I got. And you notice, again, I didn't get, there's no select statement in here. So I didn't tell it to return anything. The fact that I have this output here is what tells it to return something. And what's it going to return? Only the output variable. Okay? Are we cool? Yes.
Does it allow to do multiple output parameters or single?
We're going to get there. We're going to get there. All right, so I'm going to fold this up. Now let's slow down and take a look at that call, right? Because it's really backwards. First, let's walk through how to assign a variable. I declare it, give it a name, give it a data type. I set A equal to 1. Everybody agree? Very simple syntax, right? Okay. Now, if I call a variable with a pass-in value from a parameter, I do the same thing, right? I declare my variable, I set my variable equal to a value, and then I can call that SP. Remember SP1 from the last session, right? You should, it was only 10 minutes ago. Equals A, right? Instead of equals 1, I can assign 1 to a variable and assign that like that. It's the exact same thing. Does everybody understand that? If you don't, let me know, because you're going to be lost. Sure. Here, actually, let me show you. By setting A equal to 1, I can set ID equal to A, and it is the exact same thing as this. Right? Everybody agrees? Perfect. I'm going to get rid of, no, actually, I'm going to keep that because I like that. Okay, now, there's a handoff here that happens, right? So what happens when I need to assign this variable to a value, but at the same time get a value back from it, right? So I've got two separate conventions here, right? I need to assign a variable and I need to get a variable, right? So I'm assigning this variable to that, and at the same time assigning this variable to that. Yeah, you can, you don't have to. But yes. So when I call this guy, let's go back here now. Sure? Okay. All right, so I'm declaring my variable up here. This is my regular variable call, right? And this is my output. This myDB is the one that's right here as an output variable, right? So I'm going to assign that output variable this guy, and I'm going to tell it that this is an output. Okay? So this is the same as, we'll say, that, because I'm assigning that variable, right? And I'm assigning that variable that variable. See? Now, what is going to be passed in here? Looking at this code, what is the value of this guy when I pass it in? Nope. Nope. When I pass it in right now, what is it? It's null because I haven't assigned it. I've created it, but I haven't assigned it anything, right? So right now I'm passing in null. Does everybody understand that? So now that we know I'm passing in null, I'm saying myDB equals null. And I'm passing that in to this guy right here, right? But I'm also saying that I want this guy, when the SP returns, to be given the value that this was that's returned by the SP of my DB. Do you get it?
Why are we doing this? Sorry,
Because you're a glutton for punishment.
I'm just trying to understand the logic behind this. Like, what could be a possible business scenario or any scenario that would want this kind of a logic in it?
Right. I'm going to show you. Okay? But yes, I thought that way for years. Okay? So
And if so,
this isn't an out variable. You just don't have to say n. Right?
but that implies that I can pass a value to the stored procedure
Yes.
to be used by the school.
Yes. Okay?
And that's the reason it's backwards.
Yes. But yeah, this is a two-way street. Anytime you see the output, just know that this one is being assigned to this one before the call, and this one is being assigned to this one after the call.
So there's no pure output variable?
Sure there is. I mean, I don't have to pass it a value.
So we could just use,
Don't get ahead of the story. Let's go through some examples, okay? And then I just have to select my new DB, right? Now, here's a question for you. Could I do this? Could I make both of these the same? I know, that's a real head scratcher, isn't it? Of course I can. I just chose to make them separate. I put it new DB so you knew it was the one after it, right? But yeah, you can do that. I do it all the time. In fact, I like to do that. It shows me, right? So I'm going to change that back. There we go. And now when I run this guy again, with any luck, yes, I get DB1. If I pass that in a 2, with any luck, I'll get a 2, right? Will you stop that? 2. I am a master SP coder. All right. So now let's alter this guy again. Let's see what we're supposed to be looking at. Okay, so I think the devil here is going to be in the call. The devil may be in the call. That's the same call as the last one. I think I'm just adding a new one. I don't see a difference here. Oh, I'm just adding an and here, but let me see what the call is. Okay, I understand. Rightio. I need to have what? Better comments in my stuff. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to alter this guy. All right. So now I'm going to actually set my variable this time. So I'm actually passing in a value. So this guy is YYY right now. And it's going to be this, and I'm assigning it to this one, right? So before the call, this guy equals this guy. But after the call, this guy is going to equal this guy. We agree with that, right? And what am I expecting back? I don't know. I'm going to run it first, and then I'll say that's just what I expected. That's exactly what I expected. See? Told you that's what I was going to do. But let's see if it actually is what we expected. So it equals ID equals 2, DB equals YYY, and I got back 2. You see there? So I can use the value that I pass in, change it, and then pump something back out. Right?
that's true.
Yes, exactly. But the first one wasn't, because I didn't officially pass anything in, right? I just passed it in as a null. So I'm going to say this again because I think it's really important and it's a really good way to think about it. Before the SP runs, this guy is set equal to this guy. After the SP is finished, this guy is set equal to this guy, and then you select him, and then you've got your data to use. Right? Perfect. Now, so do you have to pass in as a name param? No, you don't. I can take this guy right here and say that right there Notice I've got new DB as an output, right? I didn't say this equals that, right? In which case, that is a true output. See, I told you, don't get ahead of the story. So it is a true output because I'm not using any input value in there. And with any luck, I'll get, what are we expecting? DB2 maybe? Woo, DB2, I am a master. Okay, so does everybody understand this syntax, right? This is the data, this is the variable I want to populate with that output. Even though I didn't put my DB equals new DB, it's still new DB output, it'll still assign it. Because I told it, its output, this is the variable of the output. Right? Right. And then, don't forget, you always have to select it. Now this seems really convoluted, because you have to declare, then you have to do all this, and you have to put an output, and then you have to select. It's not really that bad once you get used to it, but does this syntax make more sense to you than it did the first time I ran it? I see very few people nodding their heads. Everybody else is shaking their head. Does everybody understand this? Because if not, I'm telling you, you're going to be sorry. Yes?
Why do you have to have a select at the very new DB?
Because I want to read that value now. I don't have to. I can do this. And it assigned it, but I can't see it. I could do that and use that variable somewhere else, lower in an SP, right? But right now, I want to see the value. Okay, let's move on then. And what are we doing now? Okay, this is an interesting scenario. Assigning a default value to an output parameter. So this gets kind of hairy. Let's go ahead and run this guy. Does anybody know why I'm doing alter instead of drop and create? I'm sure somebody does. I know you do, right? Yeah. Anybody else?
Keep your permissions?
Yeah. Very nice. Here, you get a remote. No. I give that to somebody else. You get a stapler. Yeah, because remember, SPs have permissions. And you can start giving people permissions to run these SPs, and if you drop and recreate them, they no longer have permissions. But with alter, it keeps permissions and just changes the definition of the SP. Very important in a prod scenario. All right. I ran this, right? Let's run it again. Okay. So now, what am I doing here? Declaring my variable? Simple. Calling my SP and passing it in my value, right? What is the value of my DB when the SP starts? Null, right. Because this guy is null because I haven't assigned him a value yet, right? What is the value of new DB when it finishes? Whatever my DB was when the SP finished, right? So what do we expect this to be? Since I'm passing in a 2, because I've got this as a default value of y, right? And if it equals 2 and y, I expect it to be DB2. So let's go ahead and run that guy, and we get null. Oops. What went wrong? Wait a second is right.
What you've just done there is not assigning that value beforehand. In the list below, you assign the value to it. But when you call it here, you're not assigning the value.
Right. That's because I have a default, right? I have my default right here. So by not passing it in a value, hold on, let me get through this. By not passing it in a value, shouldn't the default kick in? Okay, why? Now you can talk.
Okay.
Talk. Go.
Different
Move.
order procedure.
What?
It's a different order procedure.
No, it's not. Watch, I'll run this one. And then I'll call it. It's the same SP.
Because you're starting with the value of new DB at the time of execution, which is null.
Right. I am passing in a value, and that value is null. Right? There is a big difference between not passing in a variable and passing in a variable with a null value. Right? So this is a tricky one in that, yes, I am passing it. So when I have this guy right here with a default value in it, how can I get this thing? How can I get this thing to use this default value? Yes, but then I can't get my value back out because I'm not assigning it. So call it without the assignment operation, like I just did. Right? So here's a little thing. I'll call this dead syntax for lack of anything else to call it, right? This syntax is legal, but you actually can't do anything with it. Because if I assign this value as a default, the only way to get that out is to not pass in the parameter, right? But the only way to get the output parameter is to assign it to a variable, right? So while this syntax itself is legal, it is actually impossible to do. You can't pull back a value that way. So I can set that. I can do this, right? But then I can't use it as an output. I have to use it as a select at the end. Got that? Good. So I wanted to throw that in there for you because not many people know about that. And it's one of those little tricks in code that'll really kind of get you, right? Okay. And I have to stop at... I got half an hour. Okay. I can do that. And where are we? I think this is the same thing. Yeah, that's the same thing, as far as I know. Well, let me run this again just to make sure, because I'm not sure where I am. Yeah, that's the same thing. All right, good.
Can I stop you for 1 second?
And I explain all that right here. Yes?
I understand you're passing and all that. The problem is you've got that declare in the procedure, which should override because it's taking effect when it's being called.
This one?
Yes. And
It
I
shouldn't.
had expected that the first time it would work and then subsequently it wouldn't because the value had been overridden.
Now, why do you think that this should override?
Because that's part of the procedure, not part of the procedure call. And the procedure should come in.
But this value right here is a parameter default, right? It's saying if you don't pass anything in for my DB, use this, right? But we are passing something in. We're passing in a null value. We're specifically saying this guy, right? Cool. Oh, it's not easy. This is a tricky little piece of syntax here, right? I'm going to save that. So yeah, when I post this, I'm going to post all this code up with it so you can go through it again. And you can see I explain all that right here. Hopefully, I explain it. Alrighty. So, output parameter usage. I'm going to do that. Now, this is a little bit more of a practical example for you, right? Hopefully this will be made clear a little more. I'm going to alter this guy just to make sure it's what I want. Let me IntelliSense this thing. And here's what I've got. I have got an SP called dbNameGet that gets the first database name from this table, fully qualified, where the recovery model is simple, right? So I want to get the first database in the list that has a simple recovery model. And you notice how I'm not using output parameters, right? I'm showing you the difference between the two now, right? This one is a simple select statement. This one declares a variable, pulls back a temp table. It inserts from that SP. This is how you have to get values from one SP to another one when you don't have output variables. You have to create a temp table and you have to insert it with the execution of that procedure. How many haven't seen this syntax before? Insert exec. Perfect. Okay, good. So one thing to note, the columns in the table, or at least the columns being inserted, have to match the columns being returned by the SP. There is no if, and, or but about it. If you're returning 80 columns from the SP, you have to have 80 columns in here. Not in here. You could have 4,000 columns in here and only inserting 80 of them, right? So I highly advise that when you do this, always explicitly define your insert statement columns so that this will be done. Yes?
Must it be temp table?
No.
Okay.
No. But in this SP, yes. Okay. And then I'm going to set dbName equal to the select from that. And there's only going to be one value here because I did up here select top one, right? So there's only ever going to be one dbName put into here, which is why I can get away with doing that, right? And then I select this. So we've got all of this code here to get down to that, right? Yes?
You are using a set and then select. In here, you can just say select and then remove the next select. Do you have a preference, or it's just the way you have put it?
The question is, I'm using a set here, and then a select up there, and then a select down here.
No, not down there.
Oh, I see. Oh,
And it could be just select so and then value. It will the set or can be replaced by select and then a second.
what line number are you talking about?
44.
44.
If you remove the select.
Yeah. Select dbName from.
Instead of set, you say select, it will work the same way.
Yeah.
Is there any reason you are preferring?
Okay, so the question is, why am I doing set instead of select equals? I go back and forth, really. Yeah, it depends on what mood I'm in. Yeah. Okay, so when I run this, let me do this first. So I should get a dbName back. There we go. I got a dbName back. Perfect. So that is doing it without an output parameter, right? Everything is a select statement. This guy returns a select statement right there. This guy returns a select statement wherever the hell it was. I got lost. Oh, because it's folded. And this one returns a select statement right there, right? So we've got how many lines of code to do this? 35 to 45, 10 lines of code to do that. Okay. Now let's do it with an output parameter. So I'm going to define dbName as an output, and I'm going to set dbName equal to top one. Same thing, right? Nothing's changed except the fact that I don't have a select down here. I'm just counting on the output variable. Does everybody understand that? Perfect. So when I do that, and now I'm going to alter this one, I'm going to declare the variable, and I'm going to execute the variable and set that equal to that, and then select that, and look, I've done it in 3 lines instead of 10. Do you see? It can be a lot shorter call. It's a lot more concise. So now when I do this, and run it, I should get the same thing. There we go. And it's a lot easier to maintain the contract that way because you're just talking about variables now, right? If you come back with a variable that's not there, it's just going to be null, right? So you don't have to worry about the width of a result set. You can just assign variables, and it's a lot shorter call. And there's actually a case, if you do these insert selects that are in here, that are in this top one, you can only do so many of these before SQL will throw up at you. What I mean by that is, if I have one SP call calling another SP, calling another SP, right, and they all have insert exec, it's going to tell you you can't do insert exec anymore because it takes up the namespace, it takes up the memory space of something or other, right? It won't let you do it. You can't call one inside of another that calls another one, right? So you eventually either have to switch to global temp tables. Do I have to preach against that? Okay, good. Or go to permanent tables. Not a bad solution, but you have to do it right? To ensure that only your SP call gets the data that it's supposed to get, right? Or go to output parameters. And you'll never have that problem again. And you'll run into that problem from now. You'll remember this. In a few months, you'll be writing something. You'll say insert exec, and it'll throw up at you. And you'll be like, what the? Oh, damn, Sean told me that, didn't he? And you'll call me by name and say, yes, he is a master of SPs. All right. Let's fold this guy back up again so it stays out of my way. And there's our output thing that we just did. Nice and concise. Now, it works just as well with 2 parameters. Output, output. I'm outputting both of these guys now, right? To answer your question from before. So, same thing. It's dbname get. This time, I'm just hard coding the ID because I just wanted to get the point across that you can do 2, right? I don't really care what the ID is. But look, this one's being set here. This one's being set here. They don't even have to be set in the same place like a select statement, right? That's another thing that can make it really, that can make this a lot easier way to code. When you do things with select statements, and I do this plenty of times, at the end, you have to have a select statement, and you have to select every single variable and every single column you want, right? And they all have to be lined up down there in the same select statement, right? Well, here, I can assign this one here and this one 4,000 lines later, and whatever the last value is what's going to get returned. I don't have to make sure that I push them all the way down to the end and maintain this list of them at the bottom, right? So it can make it easier, and it can make it harder, right? Because now you go, where the hell is this variable getting assigned, right? So does everybody get this? Now, how do you think that call goes? Pretty easily, right? I'm going to do that. And I'm going to do this one. And now when I make that call, I'll show you the call in a second. I get both values. And here's what the call looks like. It's the exact same. Call it. dbname equals dbname output. ID equals ID output. And then select them both. It's that simple, right? The syntax doesn't change just because there's a comma in front of it, right? So, to call output parameters, this is equal to this before the SP call. It reverses after the SP call. This is equal to this. It doesn't change just because I have another one. And then I can use them or select them. Well, I'm actually using them when I select them, right? I'm using them in a select statement. All right. And there we go. That's that. Now, it's not, yes? You're going to have to say it a little bit softer. I can still barely hear you.
If you had to go like in between the execution of your procedure and then your selection of the variable, would you be able to select those variables?
No.
That's what I thought. That's what I'm
Right. Okay. No, it's fine. Okay. So now we're going to switch topics just a little bit, and let's talk about componentization, or components, if you can't read a big word like that. Because some of you guys are devs, right? So I assume I have to use like really small words? Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. All right, so components. I said we were going to talk about it in the last class. I said we were going to talk about it here, right? So what do I mean by components? I mean that these guys, these programs that we're writing inside of here, right, are going to become components to other procedures, to other programs. Everybody here know what a DLL is, right, in Windows? It is a specialized file, right? It's a specialized file that can be executed not by a person, but by another by another program, right, that performs a specific function, right? So that function can be printing, that function can be making an internet call, that function can be opening a file. It doesn't matter what the function is. The function, it does what it's supposed to, right? The printer DLL does not make internet connections, right? If it needs an internet connection for some reason, it'll call out to the internet DLL and it'll come back, right? Don't you love these official terms, the internet DLL? So these things have specialized functions. You call them for that function, and then you return the data, and then you go on about your business, right? It's the whole cloud computing model, right? Anytime we see something on there, anytime we see a network diagram, you always see like the network, the firewall, the cloud is the internet, right? Why is the internet a cloud? Because it's too big to define. Nobody knows what goes on in there, right? It doesn't matter. We send a call, we get a call, right? It's just a cloud, right? Kind of like a restaurant, right? You place your order, they go turn in the order. You have no damn idea what happens to your food back there, but it comes up back up the chain to you, hopefully as unmolested as possible, right? But you have no idea how it gets made, and that's the way it should be. Trust me, you don't want to know. I was in restaurants for years. You don't want to know. And this is the same thing. So the cook is a component of that restaurant. The waiter is a component of that restaurant. The busboy is a component of that restaurant. You don't see him taking orders, right? Well, not from customers anyway, right? So they do one thing and one thing only. And that's what we're going to start doing here. I've pulled this out of my maintenance routine, and it shows you I've got two output parameters, op name and db size. And what I'm trying to do here is it handles, you want these guys to be as generic as possible. And you see I've named this generic-ish SP. So it is a generic-ish SP, right? It's highly specialized. It can handle multiple modules, so it can handle my reindex, my checkDB, and my backup module. But so far, those are the only three that it can handle. So it's highly specialized, right? So it's generic-ish. It's generic in that it gives me the database size of whatever database, right? But the database size has to be calculated a specific way depending on which module I'm running, right? So I can't just pull database size because that would be too easy, right? I have to give you different methods. I give you different methods to calculate the size. And so for each one of these modules, you can decide how you want the database size to be calculated. And it may be different based on each module, right? So I pass in the module, I pass in the op name, I pass in the database name that I want the size of, and then I return the op name and the database size. Okay? So this is only generic-ish. But I would call this, or I do call this, from a number of SPs. So this gets called from more than one place. And look how big it is. Yeah, I know, DB size, right? You'd think it'd be a lot easier than that. But, you know, if it's worth engineering, it's worth over-engineering. And I'm going to come back to that, I think, in a minute, or something similar to it. Now, here's another good one, service check. I have to check to see if the agent service is running before I can kick off any jobs. So here, I've got service status as an output. And it's really, service status is really kind of a misnomer because it's a bit, right? It should be service on, right? Service running, service off even, if you will, right? But service status, okay, I'll take the mulligan on that one. That was a little misnamed. Chances are what happened is I named it first and decided to do something else with it and change it to a bit and then just never went back and renamed it. That's probably what happened. So here, I'm passing in nothing because I'm looking for the agent service for this specific instance. That's all I'm looking for, right? So it's generic-ish because it can be called from multiple things, but it only looks, and it can be used for a number of instances on the server, right? But it can only pull back the agent for that instance, right? So it's generic, but only generic-ish. And when you're designing SPs, God, I could talk about this all day, but when you're designing SPs, you have to make a decision sometimes on how to do things. Here, if the version is less than 10.5, that's 08R2, right? I'm shelling out to command shell and running PowerShell, getting Win32 service via PowerShell to get that data. Why am I doing that? Because it's the only way to do it, basically. I mean, there are some other command line ways to do it, I'm sure, but PowerShell's the best, right? But there is no SQL Server way to get the service status in R2 and below. So I have to do something else to get it, right? But if it's above R2, then I can get it from this lovely server services table. Ah, isn't that great? But the problem is in design. Do I say that I'm going to always make this call regardless of the version to make it a simple SP? Or do I say do I want to use, I'll say, the more SQL version and do it this way on the higher level boxes, knowing that eventually this code will be completely phased out because R2 will be dead completely and we won't have to worry about it anymore. That's a decision you have to make on your own, right? You can see which one I chose to do, because this one, a little bit faster. I mean, yeah, this one's a little bit faster. The other one, a little bit of overhead. You got to shell out. You got to spin up PowerShell. You got to do the thing. You got to call it back up the stack, right? But if you want that data in SQL, you're going to do it, right? So you've got to make these decisions when you write SPs. Am I going to make it generic enough so that a so-so method of doing something I use all the time? Or am I going to split those out so that as they age out, they'll use the better method and they'll always be using the best method they can for the version of SQL they're on, right? I can't make that decision for you. And I honestly go back and forth sometimes, depending on the egregiousness of the lower level code, right? There's that one. And it is, again, generic-ish. Now, tell me, what would it take to make this fully generic? I keep saying generic-ish, right? What would it take to make it fully generic? By a component standard. Don't everybody shout out at once. Come on, just raise your hand. No, well, if I take that away, the PowerShell is not the problem. It is, but it's not. Do what? Put it in. No, that won't make the SP itself any more generic. That'll just put it in the master database. Okay, let me put it this way. What makes it not fully generic now? Why is it not fully generic now, guys? Generic means generalized, right? Not non-specific. Is it specific? Right now it is? How is it specific now? Well, it's below or equal to 10.5 and above 10.5, so it'll cover all the versions of SQL, right? It's generic. I mean, it's not generic because it only looks at the SQL agent for this instance. I can only pull back the status of one service, right? So how would I make it generic? Well, pass it in as an instance, sure, but let me show you. Here, I've made it completely generic by passing in the service name I'm interested in, which can be a wildcard as well, right? And the status. And I'm going only with PowerShell in this case. Well, I didn't delete it, but it's only going to do PowerShell. Wait a minute. Nope, sorry. This one is not the fully generic one. It says it is, but there's no way it can be. There we go. This is the fully generic one. I mislabeled that one. So I'm passing in the service name, and this one is only PowerShell because now I can pull back any service status, not just the SQL services, right? So look, let me run this guy, and I can pass in. Now look, this is a really important part, right? Remember how I said that default values for input variables will help you maintain your contract? And I said I'd talk about it later. Now's later. So I've got two parameters to pass in, and I only passed in one, right? I passed in service status as an output, right? Set it equal to service on. But what about the service name? Well, by default, I'm still going to look for the SQL agent. See, it's not an output parameter, so I can set a default value to it, right? So for clients that are still on the old version of only passing in the service status and getting back a 1 or a 0, this allows me to not break the contract. And for new ones, when I want to call a different one, say I want to call the SQL Server service itself, it says it's not on. You're a liar. I may be. I think I'm in the wrong database. Workshop. Let's do that. There we go. And let's try this one. And it still says it's off. Screw you. I must have screwed something up. And then here's the DNS one. It won't work either. There we go. DNS client is on, right? Because I'm using in here, there is no service called DNS, but in here I'm using, where is it? Match, which is a regular expression operator. So it says if the word DNS is anywhere in here, anywhere in this display name, I want you to return it. Now, a couple questions, and then I'll let you guys go. Why am I selecting this? How many of you guys know PowerShell? Okay. Why am I doing that at the end of the call?
That's the first item in the array.
Yeah. Why am I doing it that way?
You should get multiple matches on the match.
Yeah, exactly. Because I could get multiple matches. Now, why am I using command shell only now instead of using it from a table like I did in the last one?
Some of these services aren't going to be accessible.
Yeah, only the SQL services are in the table, right? And I wanted to make this generic so that I could call this from any application, whether it be PowerShell or VB or C# or a front end or something that needs to know if a service on a specific box is on, right? So that's what I mean by components. I can take this, and now all I need to do is call, this way from any application, and I can get the status of the running status of any service. And this could be, you could blow this up and just, make it really, really rich, right? This is just a simple example. Or I could call it with one parameter to make it backward compatible with clients that I've already got. And I do this all the time. Does everybody get that? With that in mind, it is 2:31, and I'm going to call this Master Stored Procedure Workshop. Hey, I got it right. Come on up.